This is the Content Strategy Insights podcast, episode number 120. Your newsfeed has included a lot of stories lately about artificial intelligence. From reports on auto-generated news stories to concerns about sentient bots, AI seems to be everywhere. Another place that AI is appearing is in the content workflows at prominent tech companies and other businesses. May Habib is the CEO at Writer.com, where they're building an AI writing and editing platform designed to support human creativity and improve content operations.
Welcome to the Content Strategy Insights podcast, where accomplished content strategy experts share their wisdom with our friends in the content community. Our mission is to democratize content strategy, to make its principles and practices accessible to everyone. And now, here's your host, Larry Swanson.
Hey everyone, welcome to episode number 120 of the Content Strategy Insights podcast. I'm really happy today to have with us May Habib. May is the founder of Writer.com, an AI writing assistant for content folks. And welcome to the show, May. Tell folks a little bit more about what you're up to these days at Writer.
Ooh, hi, Larry. I am so excited to be on the show. And I am day 7 COVID. So my occasional cough is not contagious, I promise. Writer is an AI writing and editing platform. We are about 50 employees based in San Francisco. We are remote first, so lots of us working all over the place. I myself split my time between London and San Francisco. And we are on a super fun mission of really helping infuse AI and technology throughout this writing continuum, a continuum of ideation, writing, editing that all of us go through when we're working on original content for work. And it's been a super, super amazing ride building out this product with, I think, some of the smartest people in the content world as customers.
I don't know. I know some of them, and I think you're right. But you know, it's interesting. And you said that you split your time between London and San Francisco. One of the things, like AI, is always in the news these days. Just in the last few days, like The Economist experimented with writing their lead story with AI, and and there's also, we're right around the time of the famous Google engineer who thought his bot had turned sentient. What do you have to deal with that in your job, like the ongoing glut of news about AI? And it's, well, I guess I'd love to get your take on, like, how accurate do you think the news is about AI, or is there a lot of like
Yeah, well, it's fun because we don't have to really go to the news to kind of be dealing with a lot of these issues. We are a few weeks from announcing something very exciting that's been in the works for a few months and that we've had customers on for a few months already. And so the kinds of questions that are in the headline, really the weekend through this week around large language models at Google, or the Economist's kind of in-depth piece on AI over the weekend, we literally are dealing with them every day. I mean, the number of times someone has gotten a demo of Writer and said something like, "Oh, wow, you all are," half jokingly, half not, coming for my job. I mean, it literally happens every day. And of course, the answer is no. Yeah. But, throughout the last 30 years of innovation, every time a group of people has asked that question, it has meant that we've been on the precipice of either new jobs being created in that field, or the job itself being reinvented. And I do think, we are helping usher in a type of content person who is half data scientist, half editorial leader. And we can talk more about what that means. But, the TLDR on the exact question, I don't think large language models are general intelligence. And God, if large language models were general artificial intelligence, like, that would be a real letdown for me, because that is not what I was expecting. I definitely am expecting something more than that. But is it very, very human-like? Is it indistinguishable? Yeah, the answer is yes. Would you trust it more than a 7 or 8 year old to make decisions that your life depended on? I think not. I
Right.
would actually still take the 8-year-old.
No, that comes up a lot is like I think this is why I asked about the media hype around AI, because there's so much, like, there's this assumption that we're close to general intelligence, but like that even the most, like, I had a chance to chat with like an AI pioneer at the Knowledge Graph conference a few weeks ago and was asking him about like how close are we to having like an AI that's like got the intelligence of a 3-year-old child. And he goes, maybe a decade. It's like it's a ways off.
Yeah. But
And
sounding like you have intelligence is very different than actually having it. And what's beautiful about these language models is, you are training AI to understand human language and to like answer really, really specific, hard questions. So it's just been magical putting it to use for our customers.
Mhm.
Like, it is astounding. It is beautiful. Like, the results are poetic. I am so excited for what we are, together with our customers, going to reveal soon. But there's a lot of hype, like garbage in, garbage out, but a lot of work in, and this is pretty extraordinary technology.
And you mentioned a minute ago the continuum of activities that are involved in like modern content creation and I don't know about management as well, but like you talked about like you can't, like, everything from like just planning and ideation and writing and editing and the whole flow. It sounds like we don't have to worry about our jobs. That, like, if anything, you alluded to like maybe we'll be creating more jobs or making our jobs more interesting. Can you talk a little bit about how AI kind of can help at each of those stages in the editorial and the writing and creative process?
Yeah, we think about AI supported by humans and humans supported by AI as kind of two separate but super codependent parts of our product. So, the content generation piece, let's put it all in that bucket, is certainly, AI driven, but trained on the content that you want it to produce, which is all not just human written, but human curated and analyzed and trained and fine-tuned. And then there are the whole host of writing tasks where it is just so much faster to whether it's requires a ton of context, or it's a short piece of content, or it's communication. But there's a whole host of communication where the AI supports the writer in the driver's seat, or the person in the driver's seat, and that is the editorial function, or simply the editing function, or the branding function. So we think about this continuum of writing tasks that we do from ideation to editing. And depending on where you are in the continuum, it's going to be more efficient or effective to have AI lead, or the person lead with AI assisting. And so it is this give and take. And, the beauty that we're trying to strike is in that layer actually being kind of invisible, and us really being able to intuit, right, from a technology perspective, where someone is writing, what they're writing, what the context is, and when might an edit be appropriate versus an autocomplete versus actually a whole paragraph being suggested, versus actually just like a spark of an idea. And so that's the continuum that we're referring to, and learning how to use AI, or what is the most appropriate and efficient way to use AI without breaking your workflow, right? Actually, like your pre-AI workflow. That, I think, is the new tool belt, is the new skill set that people are developing using our technology. Sorry, that some of that was a little vague. I'll be able to.
No, but it inspires a lot of questions. I'll say that for example, that like it sounds like that you can make the case that at every stage in that process, there are ways that AI can help you, or that you can go to AI. Like it sounds, some of what you were saying made me think like if you were just crisp and on top of things and could remember everything that you'd ever learned and had your style guide memorized, it would. That's kind of how you picture it. Is that sort of how it works in application?
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. And that's well, I guess, and to that, like things like one of the big concerns of any content designer or UX writer is needing to abide by a style guide or voice and tone, all kinds of guidance is provided. Can you talk a little bit about how AI helps with that?
Yeah, absolutely. I think, first of all, style guide, like the word, needs like a rebrand, because like this is not a nice to have kind of like, please follow this style guide. Like most organizations we talk to have pretty mature content teams. And so this is the body of work that is the result of a deep understanding of the audience and the business objectives and the brand and the language that like helps them really nail the messaging to that audience. And so like complying with a set of guidelines for most of our customers is not nice to have. It's a difference between their content hitting the mark and achieving objectives versus like absolutely not nailing why it was written in the first place, whether it was an error message or a blog post. And so AI there is really about ingesting that style guide in the form of configurations and settings, and then being worked back into a workflow. And it's AI versus rules based, because like the most simple rule in a style guide that you could imagine, like everything from capitalize the B in Black when it refers to the Black community, right? If you aren't using artificial intelligence to code up that rule, right, we'd be asking you to capitalize the B in Black when it refers to a blackboard or a black car. And so the AI that is presented by really deep learning models. We don't use transformers everywhere. It's kind of sometimes, a nail looking for a hammer, or whatever the saying is. But whether it's deep learning or transformer models, we are taking an AI approach to just about everything in that style guide, obviously like numbers and dates and things that really are very rules-based or rules-based. So that's the AI in it. And to be able to, take someone's 60, 70, 80 page style guide and turn that into a Chrome extension, that's what we're world class at that. And that was the start of our business.
Well, and you just mentioned a term, transformer model, that I don't think all of our folks might be familiar with. Can you talk a little bit about what that is?
Yeah, so a lot of the fuss, right? GPT-3, OpenAI, the big models from Google, everything that you're hearing as getting the closest to general artificial intelligence really is the work of these LLMs, large language models. And large language models almost always is describing transformer technology, and the transformer refers to really a breakthrough in a set of algorithms that, together with the principles of deep learning, have resulted in, and of course, a shit ton of processing power, have resulted in programs that can answer questions and prompts really just as well as a human can, better actually, in terms of recall and depth and precision and
Right. That's it. So that kind of gets at one of the strengths of AI is like in terms of like, if you had a perfect memory and knew everything in the world, you could have that. We're at the stage in computing power and programming elegance that you can actually do that. But that's just basically parity.
You do it better, right? Because like our human creativity is intentional, whereas like LLM creativity is by accident. Oh, that was really creative. Like that literally was by accident. Whereas when a human is creative, thanks to them remembering a lot of what they read or, creating something novel, they know that they've been creative. You know what I mean?
Yep. And it sounds like you can get a little bit of like a virtuous cycle of human creativity with this insane body of facts and knowledge that an AI bot provides.
One second, Larry. Facts and knowledge are not things that you actually are getting out of GPT-3 or a lot of the language models, right? Like the fact filtering, and that's actually something that we do and are working on doing more of. It's very dangerous in the wrong hands, and I don't mean like elections and like fraud and stuff like that, but I mean like in work settings when a fact is presented with a shit ton of supporting material and it really sounds like a fact, people aren't going to check that it's a fact. But like everything from, when was Teddy Roosevelt president to like who won the 2016 election, like you are getting a lot of misinformation out of these language models, like at a steady clip. So it's not rare. It is frequent. And so folks who are using them, our customers included, right, like know what to watch out for. And we structured things in a way that reduces that. But yeah, this is not about facts and knowledge for sure. Like every single actual fact needs to be fact checked.
Interesting. So that's because you're right, like those large learning models, they're just learning from general sources, which are full of all kinds of misinformation, and they're making invalid inferences about like facts in the world based on like what they're just reading, right?
Yeah, they're mimicking, right? And so it's the transformer technology is literally like what word comes after this word, right? Based on everything you've heard and read, and so. The facts are constructed to mimic facts that the model has ingested versus actually like semantically answering questions, right? Like Google's AI on that front, right, in terms of just like how they've set up their SERPs and just the search technology, to me is actually much closer to generalized AI than some of these LLMs, like on that definition, right? Like it gets its facts straight. And so I know they're using a lot of interesting stuff under the hood that pertains to the big LLMs, but they're the different applications.
That's right, because that's the way you just said. That's like, I think maybe I was conflating because it's all Google, and Google has that giant knowledge graph that runs their search engine, but that is more semantic and based on something closer to knowledge and facts than the large learning model. So that's that's one of those things where I'm fairly well informed about this stuff, but even I'm making big mistakes like that. How can people be good like consumers of AI technology and wisdom and lore? Like how can we best understand AI and how it can help us as content folks?
Good question. I think the body of work that we're about to embark on really kind of bring people in, I think is going to help a lot. It's still very early days. With Ryan Law from Animals, we're actually doing an AI generated content masterclass to a select group of folks. So we'll be promoting that soon. It is still, the provenance of a few, and everything from the SEO implications to how you structure your team when you're ready. I think there's a lot of learning that we've had that we're going to be sharing from customers really doing this at the bleeding edge over the last few months. I think it's here and it's here to stay. We are just at the very beginning, and the use cases that I think are going to be the most exciting are ideation and creativity on the one hand, and then really the kind of the rote production of things, of content types that are less creative, but are necessary. Everything from, executive bios to employee profiles to case studies, right? AI is also taking a 3,000 word case study and turning it into 200 words that sales can use, much more interactively. And so, those are a lot of the use cases that we're excited to be talking about soon.
That's it. Because when I think of, you're reminding me of the early use cases of AI in writing, like in journalism, sports and business stories, just almost all immediately done by AI. You're watching this roll out in the content world, and you just mentioned a few of them, like the executive summaries and bios and things like that. How do you see it all unfolding? Like, what do you think is going to be the easy, quick stuff that like, AI can help us with this right away, and it's going to be everywhere? What do you think and from that end of the spectrum to like, boy, it's going to be hard to ever really do this with AI?
Yeah. I think I'll start with the last one. I think the journalistic style thought leadership, interviewing your customers, interviewing thought leaders, like really presenting new information. Like, let's not forget, like a lot of these models, they're trained on 2021, maximum, like, most are like most of GPT-3 is like stuff that's 2019 or older. So and certainly not future focused. So I think all of the stuff that we already know sets brands apart is like, quite safe. How do you get an intro, or how do I wrap this up? Like, sure, you can use ideas for that, but you can use, AI for ideating on those kinds of things if you're stuck. And I do feel like, having used it myself now for months for my own writing, including for our own content marketing and columns and things like that, it is super handy for the kind of, I call it like my personal self-loathing when I get writer's block. It's really good to keep you in a state of flow. And for those of us who are, dopamine addicts, sort of like keep kind of bringing keeping the affirmations going to like keep you motivated to like finish your damn fucking piece. So that I think is like for the neurodiverse among us, a underappreciated angle. So I think thought leadership and the stuff that is like always creme de la creme, like that is absolutely safe. And I think the beauty is in the things that you can taxonomize, and I don't mean necessarily like intro paragraph and 20 words on this and 30 words on that. Like, we can be more creative. This is what's beautiful about the way these models work is, we can train them on customer content that looks like what they want. It doesn't have to be exactly replicas. You don't want that because then it's too formulaic. So, there's a nice now result possible that gets you a lot of the way there. That is not the baseball scores of yesteryear. This person scored that many, and I don't know if you score in baseball. I don't know my baseball terminology. But these are like very formulaic articles or earnings reports, things like that, which literally were, kind of think about it as like painting by numbers, right? This is how the sentence is going to be, and this is what these are the stats we're going to put in. And those companies did fine, and they're still around, right? And still do that business. So yeah, I think it's a whole new world. I'm so excited. We'll have to come back on this webinar, Larry. When
well, no, and and what you just said too, it sounds like that the key thing that it sounds like human creativity is always going to be like a super important part of this, regardless of how far along we get. And another thing you just said, I'm really curious now about you mentioned the training models that the stuff is that generally AI is built on, but also I'm wondering specifically, like with your product and other writing products, are you using general models to inform the advice you give with your product, or do you also learn from the corpus of do you look at all the content marketing that a company has done to make sure they don't do any? Tell me a little bit about like the content you're working with that you're training your models with.
Yeah, it's really cool. It's trained on customer data. And not sharing customer data. So we are a big privacy shop, and actually we don't ingest any customer data at all or train on customer data. But in the product, information that customers put in for the purpose of training trains their own model.
Got it. Yeah. Hey, and I'm just curious, you've mentioned several applications of this, and I'm wondering now about some of the general broad, new things in the content world, things like chatbots and virtual agents and voice assistants and that kind of stuff. And a lot of those, I know we're kind of circling around a lot of interesting stuff that's happening in the technology and content worlds, like the that auto-generated stuff, but also like the more intelligent, like NLP kind of stuff. Tell me how like your product and others are kind of like circling all that, like the semantic stuff, the NLP stuff, the knowledge stuff, and how much of it is just like taking advantage of the general information you get from these large learning models.
Yeah. It's It's super easy to be very overwhelmed. I was just overwhelmed listening to the question, right? Like so many of us are trying to do more with less, right? In this market, and the table stakes is good work, and we're in a way lucky that we don't actually have too many people wearing like strategic hats that sit between content teams, because I think those people would be like so overwhelmed as to be paralyzed with like all of the different ways they can be introducing AI driven innovation into their content practices, right? We almost always are talking to a head of the knowledge base or the head of the blog or head of editorial or head of product writing. And so like companies and teams can really conceive of these use cases with us in very specific ways. And we can grow from there. You know, the folks who are working on chatbots, and we do have customers who are using Writer for chat content or for bot content and for kind of conversation graphs. Have figured out a way to include AI generated content in that for human review. Folks who are using us in product content have figured out a way to help us accelerate that ideation and content generation piece. So it is very overwhelming to think about the confluence of how AI is really changing things, but like the reality is people in seats are hired to do like one or two very specific things. And they're, if you can conceive it, if you can think about AI writing it, it probably can. So the question is, like, what are the ways in which it changes the workflow? And the content generation piece, once you figure that out in a way, is just step one, right? Like, if you have to promote a piece and distribute a piece, and the piece needs art, and there are so many different downstream parts of this funnel that like just accelerating the content production piece alone doesn't help you meet the business goals, right? Like you've got to get it into the hands of people.
Right. And again, you just counter overwhelm me when I thought about like what you just said, about the implications for workflow and the whole process. So it's really early days, it sounds like. And you're you're kind of pioneering a lot of this stuff. What do you see as like the biggest potential? Like what excites you the most about this emerging world?
I'm most excited for the kind of control, consistency, and scalability you get. I'm a control freak. I'm the oldest of 8. Like I've always been a control freak. When you can think about with a bird's eye view, all of the different types of content and communications and copy that your company is producing, and knowing that there is like one brain that is helping influence how all of that turns out, the accelerating and just kind of additive impact that has on creating a brand, that's revolutionary. And unless you have been like American Express, we don't work with American Express, and you've like, had the same CMO for 20 years and worked with the same like very expensive agency for, 20 years, you don't get that kind of consistency, right? Most of us aren't outsourcing everything to one hive mind, right? It is like a bunch of different people and a bunch of different teams with a lot of different writing abilities, all trying to be on brand, and actually having a system, right? We call it the writing OS, where you are getting the same set of rules, same set of AI, like same brain helping influence all of that. Like that's bigger than any one piece that was accelerated by AI. Like that's transformational. And I think the companies that figure that out the soonest, right, it's an overwhelming competitive advantage. And I think a lot of our early customers are going to get there soon.
That's great. And I love that the comparison to like a 20-year relationship with a really good agency, that like if AI can get you there even a couple of years faster, that's great.
Yep.
Yeah. Well, hey, May, I can't believe it. We're already coming up on close to time.
Wow, that was fast.
Well, it's good. It always goes way too quick, and I always want to talk to you all forever. But anyhow, before we wrap up, is there anything that's just that we didn't you didn't get a chance to elaborate on fully, or just that's on your mind about AI and writing or anything in the content world?
Yeah, if I were an IC, like I would want to be exactly in this moment. I think like it is so exciting to think about all of the ways that people can add value to teams right now, thinking about doing things a little bit differently. And we're all trying to stand out with content that delights, that inspires, that informs. A lot of people right now are using AI generated content to kind of do the opposite. Like it is just a shit ton of crap. And I can't wait until Google figures out, and penalizes people who are doing that. And that might sound strange coming from someone like us, but it's not at all. I mean, we are all about AI generated content, helping the individual, and fully expect that all of that content is worked through by the time that it's published. So, I think there are a lot of open questions, but there always are when you're at the start of something new. So exciting days.
Fun. Well, hey, thanks. Yeah, and and I think I'm optimistic that Google will figure out how to sidetrack all the misplaced uses of AI.
Just track down the fake facts.
Exactly. Yeah, they're good at that.
There you go. They're good at that.
Yeah,
exactly.
Hey, one last thing, May. What's the best way for folks to stay in touch with you if they want to connect on social media or anywhere on the?
Yeah, well, follow me or add me on LinkedIn. I tend to post my thoughts there more often than on Twitter. And then anything more personal than that, I'm just May at Writer, and we're at writer.com.
Great. And I'll put that in the show notes as well. Well, thanks so much, May. Really fun conversation.
This was super fun. Great questions.
Thank you for listening. If you can think of a friend who might enjoy this episode, please share it with them. And please join us again for our next content strategy interview.